Don't listen if you use dating apps. The perfect first date. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me 3 months ago, and I'm still not sleeping right. If you're one of those people who swipes through dating apps late at night, you might want to stop listening now, because what I'm about to share will make you question every profile you've ever matched with. My name is Sarah, and I was 28 when this happened. Like most people my age, I had been using dating apps for years. Bumble, Hinge, Tinder, you name it. After a string of disappointing dates and guys who looked nothing like their photos, I was pretty much ready to give up on online dating altogether. That's when I matched with David. His profile was perfect. And I mean that in the most literal sense. 6'2", dark hair, green eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. But it wasn't just his looks, it was everything else. His bio mentioned he was a graphic designer who loved hiking, vintage horror movies from the 80s, and obscure indie bands. He had photos of himself at a Cure concert, reading Clive Barker, hiking trails I recognized from my own Instagram posts. The weird part, we matched on a Tuesday night in October, and within 5 minutes, he'd sent me a message. "Sarah, I have to ask, is that really you at the Halloween Horror Nights photo? Because if you're into classic horror, we need to talk." I stared at my phone. The photo he was referring to was buried in my profile, the 7th picture, taken 2 years ago at Universal Studios. Most guys never scrolled that far, but David wasn't most guys. Our conversation flowed like we'd known each other for years. He knew every reference I made. When I mentioned loving the Lost Boys, he immediately brought up how the Santa Carla Boardwalk was actually filmed in Santa Cruz. When I said I collected vintage vinyl, he asked if I had the original pressing of Susie and the Banshees' Juju, which I did, and which I'd never mentioned to anyone online. Lucky guess, I told myself. He's just really into the same stuff. We texted for 2 weeks straight. Long, detailed conversations about everything. Childhood memories, weird dreams, favorite books. He told me about growing up in Ohio, moving to California for college, his job at a small design firm downtown. Everything felt natural, organic, like talking to a male version of myself. When he finally asked me out, I said yes immediately. "There's this little Italian place on Melrose," he texted. "Antonello's. Family-owned, been there since the 80s. They have the best tiramisu in the city. Pick you up at 7 Friday?" I paused.
Antonello's was my favorite restaurant, a tiny place I discovered during my first year in LA. I'd never mentioned it online, never posted about it. It wasn't the kind of place people just stumbled upon. "How did you know about Antonello's?" I typed back. "A friend recommended it, said their pasta was incredible. Why do you know it?" Reasonable explanation. LA was full of hidden gems that locals passed around word of mouth. Friday came and I spent way too long getting ready. I chose a black dress, vintage from the 90s, something I'd thrifted months earlier. When David picked me up, his reaction was immediate. "That dress is perfect on you," he said. And there was something in his eyes like he'd seen it before. Very Winona Ryder and Beetlejuice. The comparison made me smile. It was exactly what I'd been going for. The drive to the restaurant was perfect. He had a playlist ready. The Smiths, Bauhaus, Dead Can Dance. Songs I'd mentioned loving in our conversations, but also deeper cuts, B-sides I'd never shared with anyone. When Charlotte Sometimes by The Cure came on, I gasped. "This is my favorite song," I said. "How did you—" "Mine too," he said quickly. "Great minds, right?" Antonello's was exactly as I remembered it. Dim lighting, checkered tablecloths, the smell of garlic and basil. But David navigated the restaurant like he'd been there dozens of times. He nodded at the hostess, knew exactly which table to request, even knew the owner's name. "Marco," he called to the elderly man behind the counter. "How's the family?" Marco beamed and waved. I was impressed and a little confused. "I thought you said a friend recommended this place." "He did. I came by last week to check it out, make sure it was nice enough for you." David's smile was warm, genuine. I wanted tonight to be perfect. And it was perfect. Unnaturally so. David ordered for both of us without looking at the menu and somehow got every single dish right. The bruschetta with extra basil, my usual appetizer, the seafood risotto, my go-to entree, even the specific wine I always ordered here. When I commented on his choices, he just shrugged. You seem like a seafood risotto kind of girl. But it was the conversation that really unsettled me. He knew things, little things, random things. When I mentioned my sister, he asked, "How's Katie doing with her new job?" I'd never told him my sister's name. When the waiter brought the wine, David said, "Sarah prefers her wine slightly chilled, even the reds." I did, but I'd never mentioned that to anyone. When I excused myself to use the restroom, I caught him watching me in the mirror's reflection, studying my movements like he was memorizing them.
"David," I said when I returned, trying to keep my voice light. "This might sound weird, but have we met before? Like, in person?" His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "No, why would you think that?" You seem to know me really well. We've been talking for 2 weeks straight," he laughed. "I pay attention. Most guys don't, but I do. That's what makes me different." He reached across the table and took my hand. His was ice cold. "I've been looking for someone like you for a very long time, Sarah." The way he said my name sent chills down my spine, like he was tasting it. After dinner, he suggested we go for a walk. The restaurant was in a quiet part of Melrose, tree-lined streets with vintage shops and cafes. As we walked, David pointed out places with an insider's knowledge that didn't match his story about being new to the area. "That bookstore has the best horror section," he said, nodding toward a small shop called Dark Delicacies. "Ever been inside?" I had. Many times. It was where I bought all my signed horror novels, where I'd spent countless Saturday afternoons browsing. But I'd never posted about it, never mentioned it online. "How do you know about it?" "I love horror books, remember? We talked about this." We had talked about horror, but I'd never mentioned that specific store. I was beginning to feel like I was losing my mind. As we walked, David's conversation became more personal, more intimate. He talked about things that felt like memories we'd shared, except we hadn't shared them. "Remember that nightmare you had about being trapped in an old house?" he said suddenly. I stopped walking. "What?" "You mentioned it in one of our conversations. The Victorian house with the red doors. You said you've had the same dream since you were a kid." I had that nightmare, regularly, but I'd never told anyone about it, let alone someone I'd known for 2 weeks. It was too personal, too strange. I don't remember telling you that." "Sure you did. Tuesday night around 2 a.m. You said you couldn't sleep because you'd had the dream again." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text history. Tuesday night, 2 a.m. I'd sent him a message saying I couldn't sleep, but nothing about the nightmare. Nothing about Victorian houses or red doors. "David, this isn't in our messages." He looked at my phone's screen, and for just a second, his expression shifted. Something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Must have been a different conversation," he said smoothly. "I talk to a lot of people online." But I was the only one. I'd checked his social media, barely any activity. Few friends, posts dating back only a few months. Like his entire online presence had been created specifically for dating apps. We were approaching my apartment building, and I realized I'd never given him my address, yet he was walking directly toward it, like he knew exactly where I lived. "How do you know where I'm going?" I asked, my voice sharper now. He stopped and turned, And in the streetlight, his face looked different, hollow, like he was wearing a mask that was starting to slip. "You told me your address." "No, I didn't. I said I'd meet you at the restaurant." "Sarah," his voice was patient, like he was talking to a child, "you're being paranoid. You gave me your address so I could pick you up." But I hadn't. I remembered specifically suggesting we meet at the restaurant because I never gave strangers my home address. It was basic dating safety. I pulled out my phone again, scrolling frantically through our messages. Nothing. No address, no mention of him picking me up. "I need to go inside," I said, backing toward my building. "Don't you want me to walk you up?" The question made my blood run cold. He was asking to walk me up, which meant he knew I lived on an upper floor. But how could he know that? "I'm fine, thank you for dinner." I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. David stood on the sidewalk watching me with that same intense stare from the restaurant. Under the harsh streetlight, his features looked sharper, more angular, less like the photos on his dating profile. "I'll text you," he called as I finally got the door open. "Sure," I said, not looking back. I rode the elevator to the 4th floor, my heart pounding. Inside my apartment, I immediately locked the door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I went to my window and looked down at the street. David was gone. I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe I had mentioned some of those things and forgotten. Maybe I was overthinking everything because I'd been single too long and wasn't used to someone paying close attention to me. But as I got ready for bed, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. On my nightstand was a book I'd been reading, The Silence of the Lambs. It was open to a specific page with a sentence highlighted in yellow. "He covets. That's his nature. And how do we begin to covet, Clarice? We begin by coveting what we see every day." I never highlighted books, ever. And I always left my books closed when I wasn't reading them. Someone had been in my apartment. I grabbed my phone and called my building's security. "Has anyone been asking about me? Anyone tried to get into the building?" "Not tonight, Miss Chen, but..." The guard's voice was hesitant.
"There was a gentleman here last week. Said he was a friend of yours, needed to drop something off. He knew your name and apartment numbers, so I figured it was okay." "What did he look like?" "Tall, dark hair, green eyes. Very polite. Said his name was David." The phone slipped from my hands. David had been in my apartment a week before our first date. He'd somehow convinced security to let him in, and he'd been going through my things, my books, my photos, my personal belongings. That's how he knew about the restaurant, the wine, my reading preferences. He'd been studying me. But it was worse than that. I ran to my closet and started going through my clothes. The black dress I'd worn tonight, it was hanging exactly where I'd left it. But something was wrong. There was a small tear in the fabric that hadn't been there before, like someone had been handling it, examining it. My computer was in sleep mode, but when I woke it up, my browser history showed websites I'd never visited. Dating profile tutorials, social media stalking guides, forums about studying potential romantic partners. The most recent search from 3 days ago, how to recreate someone's ideal partner. I called the police. The officer who came to take my report was sympathetic but not particularly helpful. "Did he threaten you? Physically harm you? Take anything from your apartment?" "No, but..." "Ma'am, what you're describing sounds like someone who did his research before a first date. That's not illegal. Weird maybe, but not illegal. He was in my apartment without permission. Your security guard let him in. He told them he was your friend, without evidence of breaking and entering. The officer left me his card and suggested I change my locks and be more careful about online dating. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow looked like someone watching me. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from David. Had an amazing time tonight. You looked beautiful in that black dress. Sleep well, Sarah. Sweet dreams about Victorian houses. I blocked his number immediately, but the messages kept coming from different numbers. Why won't you answer me, Sarah? I thought we had a connection. I know you're ignoring me. I can see you through your window. I looked toward my bedroom window. The blinds were closed, but there was a shadow on the fire escape outside. I called 911. By the time the police arrived, the shadow was gone. They found scratches on the fire escape railings like someone had been climbing up and down regularly. The officer suggested I file a restraining order.
But to get a restraining order, I needed David's real name and address. And that's when I discovered the truth that made everything so much worse. David Morrison, the graphic designer from Ohio, didn't exist. The photos on his dating profile were stolen from a model's Instagram account, a guy from Australia who'd never heard of Los Angeles or dating apps. The design firm David claimed to work for had no employee by that name. The address he'd given in our conversations was a vacant lot downtown. Everything about David was a lie, but whoever was using that identity knew everything about me. I hired a private investigator named Janet Webb. She was a former LAPD detective who specialized in cyberstalking cases. This is more sophisticated than typical online harassment, Janet told me after reviewing everything. Whoever this is has been watching you for months, maybe longer. He created an entire false identity specifically tailored to your interests and preferences. But how did he know so much about me? Janet showed me something that made my stomach drop. A printed screenshot of my apartment building's Wi-Fi network. Someone had been intercepting my internet traffic, reading my emails, monitoring my online activity. He's been inside your digital life for a long time, Sarah. Every website you visit, every message you send, every photo you take. He's been building a profile of your perfect partner based on your actual behavior, not just what you put on dating apps. So when I matched with David, you were matching with a mirror of yourself. He created someone designed to be irresistible to you specifically. The investigation uncovered more disturbing details. Security cameras from nearby buildings showed a figure watching my apartment at various times over the past 6 months, always at night, always from positions where he could see into my windows. My personal information had been purchased from data brokers. My home address, phone number, employment history, financial records. Someone had paid good money to learn everything about me. But the worst discovery came when Janet traced the stolen photos used in David's profile. They weren't just random pictures grabbed from social media. They were photos of Patrick Williamson, a 34-year-old model from Melbourne who had disappeared 3 months earlier while visiting Los Angeles. Patrick had come to LA for a photo shoot. He'd been staying in an Airbnb in Silver Lake. According to the police report Janet pulled, his last known activity was a text message to his girlfriend saying he'd met someone interesting and was going on a date. He was never seen again.
Sarah Janet said carefully, I think whoever's been stalking you might have done this before. Patrick Williamson wasn't just a random photo choice. He was specifically selected because he matched the physical type you tend to swipe right on. She showed me my dating app history. Every guy I'd shown interest in over the past 2 years had the same basic look. Tall, dark hair, green eyes, angular features. My stalker had noticed my pattern and found someone who matched it perfectly. Then he'd made that person disappear. You think he killed Patrick? I think Patrick met the same person you went to dinner with. But Patrick wasn't the target. You were. Patrick was just raw material. The police reopened Patrick's missing person case, but without a body or concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. I moved out of my apartment immediately, staying with friends while looking for a new place. But moving didn't help. The messages continued, from new numbers, new email addresses, new social media accounts. Always the same tone. Hurt, confused, like I was being unreasonable for not wanting to see him again. I don't understand why you're avoiding me, Sarah. We're perfect for each other. I made myself perfect for you. That phrase, I made myself perfect for you, haunted me. Because I was starting to understand what it meant. 3 weeks after the date, Janet called with news that made everything click into place. I found something, she said. Are you sitting down? She'd tracked down the source of the stolen photos through reverse image searches and digital forensics. The David Morrison profile had been created using pictures from Patrick Williamson's personal Instagram, but there were other photos too. Photos that had never been posted online. Pictures from Patrick's phone taken during his last days in Los Angeles. Photos of him at Antonella's restaurant. Photos of him reading The Silence of the Lambs. Photos of him wearing clothes that weren't his, standing in front of locations I recognized from around my neighborhood. Someone had been using Patrick as a living dress-up doll, making him pose for photos that would later be used to catfish me. The final photo was a selfie taken in what looked like a basement, with Patrick's eyes wide with terror. Sarah, Janet's voice was gentle but firm, I need you to look at something else. She sent me a video file. Security footage from a restaurant in Silver Lake, dated 3 months ago. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m. In the grainy footage, I could see a man who looked exactly like David from my dating app profile.
He was sitting across from someone whose back was to the camera, someone with sandy hair and a leather jacket. Patrick Williamson. But here's the thing that made my blood turn to ice. The man who looked like David was wearing Patrick's face. Not metaphorically, literally. In the clearer moments of the footage, you could see the edges where the skin didn't quite match, where the features had been surgically altered and grafted. Someone had taken Patrick's face and made it their own, and they'd used that stolen face to go on a date with me. I threw up immediately after watching the video. The FBI got involved at that point. What I'd experienced wasn't just stalking or identity theft. It was connected to something much darker. Agent Sarah Martinez explained it to me in terms I could barely process. We believe you encountered someone who engages in extreme identity theft, not just stealing social security numbers or credit cards, but literally stealing physical identities, taking someone's appearance, their mannerisms, their life story. Like the talented Mr. Ripley? Worse, Tom Ripley just impersonated people. This individual physically transforms himself into them. They'd been tracking similar cases across the country for 2 years. Missing persons whose photos later appeared on dating profiles, women who'd gone on dates with men who seemed too perfect, too tailored to their specific interests. How many others? I asked. Agent Martinez hesitated. 17 confirmed cases? Probably more. And the women? Most realized something was wrong and got away like you did. A few... She didn't finish the sentence. I was one of the lucky ones. But the investigation revealed just how deep this had gone. My stalker, whoever he really was underneath all those stolen faces, had been preparing for months. He'd infiltrated my digital life, my physical spaces, my social connections. He'd befriended my neighbors to learn my routines. He'd chatted with baristas at my favorite coffee shops to discover my preferences. He'd even gotten a job at a data recovery service that had worked on my laptop 2 years earlier, giving him access to deleted files and browser history going back years. Everything about David had been constructed from stolen pieces of my actual life and preferences. He'd built the perfect boyfriend using my own data as a blueprint. The scariest part? It had worked. I'd been completely charmed, completely convinced that I'd found someone special. If he'd been just a little less creepy about the details, a little more patient, I might have fallen in love with him. I might have invited him into my life completely.
The last contact I had was 6 months later. I'd moved to Portland, changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts. I thought I was safe. Then I got a package at my new address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It showed a woman walking out of a coffee shop I'd never been to, in a city I'd never visited. The woman was wearing my face, not someone who looked like me. My actual face, surgically removed and grafted onto someone else. And on the back of the photo, in handwriting I recognized from those first romantic text messages, was a note. "Thanks for the inspiration, Sarah. I've found someone even better now. Her name is Jennifer, and she loves horror movies too. I think you two would have gotten along great. David and Patrick and Marcus and James and all the others." I called Agent Martinez immediately, but the number was disconnected. When I looked up the FBI field office, they had no record of an Agent Sarah Martinez. I'd been talking to him again. Even after everything, he'd found a way back into my life by pretending to be the person trying to help me. That was 8 months ago. I don't use dating apps anymore. I barely use the internet at all. I pay cash for everything, use a fake name at work, move apartments every few months. But sometimes, late at night, I get a text from a number I don't recognize. "I miss you, Sarah. The new face is nice, but it's not you. Maybe someday I'll come back for the real thing." And sometimes, when I'm walking alone, I see someone in my peripheral vision who moves the way I move, who has my mannerisms, my gestures, someone wearing my stolen face, living my stolen life. If you're listening to this and you use dating apps, please be careful. Not everyone who seems perfect actually is perfect. Some of them are just very good at stealing the pieces of people who were. And if you match with someone who knows a little too much about you, who seems a little too interested in your personal details, who wants to meet somewhere they shouldn't know about, don't go. Because the person you're talking to might not be a person at all. They might be a collection of everyone who came before you. And if you're not careful, you might become part of that collection too. I still have nightmares about Victorian houses with red doors. But now in the dreams, I'm not the one being trapped inside. I'm the one doing the trapping, using someone else's hands, someone else's face, someone else's life. The line between victim and monster gets thinner every day, and I'm starting to understand why.